What about if I consider now the other side of this, where the cost of capital is greater than 10%? Well, NPV now says, well, the green is better than the red, so A is better than B. And of course, IR doesn't change, right? It's not a function of the cost of capital. And here I have big met, and here I have a constant. Okay. So is everyone comfortable with that? So all I'm doing is solving that equation and getting numbers. And then I'm looking at it from a different point of view. Well, what's the value in that project from an NPV point of view as I change the cost of capital? And I get two different recommendations. Okay. So this is sort of key to the next part of this, which is 1. Okay, good. Okay, well let me now go to the next set of notes here. Get out of here. Okay. Well, as I suggested, what we have implicit in all of this when the cash comes in is that we're reinvesting. Okay. And all of the examples that we've talked about, whether it was just that very simple initial future value definition, or when we looked at what's the future value of the set of cash flows, implicit in the reinvestment of those cash flows at that cost, at the interest rate, or when we looked at that equivalence example, again, future value, we're looking at reinvesting cash flows up when they come in. And I've got a derivation here, which I'm not going to go through line by line, but if you're sort of mathematically inclined, you want to prove to yourself this is the case. What this derivation shows you, I'm going to show you the practical reality of this rather than the derivation itself, is implicit in that formula that you're solving, that IRR formula, is that when cash comes in, for it to be true, you have to be able to reinvest at I star. So, for example, I can't go back to the last slide. So, when that first $1,000, let's say, comes in year 1, well, you've got 2 years of reinvestment. What this derivation shows you is you have to be able to invest that at K star. So, project A has 22.8%. And the issue is that realizable? Is that feasible? Okay. So, this derivation then basically looks like this. Okay. What we're doing is we're showing what happens throughout an intervening time period as I have one cash flow coming in from last time period and then the next one, and how much has the unrecovered balance of the investment gone down, and what interest rate do I need to accomplish a future value equals 0. Okay, that's what this is all about. Well, the result of that is that I need to be able to invest cash flows at I star. That's the interest rate that's offered. Okay. And let's say if you want to, satisfy yourself, just when you're home, have a look at that, and indeed that's the case. I'd like to show you, though, from my example's point of view, that indeed that's what needs to happen. Okay. And so I'd like to really spend some more time on it from this point of view. There are 2 ways of looking at it. One is that bank account view that I've always liked to flow things through, and then secondly, sort of a very practical cash flow point of view. The top part of this mirrors the derivation perfectly. Okay. And what it shows, and remember, we're saying, I want an interest rate that will force the future value of this, or present value, here I'm doing future value, they're equivalent, to be 0. So the investment at the very end is 0. Right. Well, what does it take to do that in terms of the cash flows when they come in and the ability to reinvest? Well, that IT is calculated on the basis for project A of 22.8% of the unrecovered balance. Any other number means that you're not going to get 0. Okay. First and second are hard to understand. This, I think, is a little conceptually easier in terms of what's happening in this project. Okay. And I'd like to just talk about that on the board. Okay. So think of what happened. Well, I've got this project, and I've spent $1,200 on the equipment, and of course it's gone. It's sitting in the equipment. And we believe there's a net revenue stream arising from that investment over the next 3 years, it's going to look like that. Okay. Well, and we think IRA is 22.8%. And my issue now is, does that mean ROR, return of investment, or return on investment, or I'm going to say rate of return, or I'm going to put ROI. Does that mean, if I say 22.8% IRR, many people will lead to the conclusion that that's the return on investment. So the issue here, and this is the question mark, is that a return on investment of 22.8%? Okay, that's the issue. If it isn't, well then, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a number that solves an equation. Well, again, when we talked about the bond question, how do I determine whether or not I'm going to get a 22.8% rate of return on my investment? Well, the first line there says, why don't I do this from a future value point of view? Okay. And so, if I make the claim, I'm making 22.8%, what wealth has to be generated from this investment? Well, I hope everyone agrees by now that if I say, if I have this much money 3 years from now, F given T, 22.8% comma 3, okay, that indeed I have made 22.8% return on my investment. Okay, simple definition. Okay, so do that calculation, and up here it's 22.22. So this is the goal, if you will, goal to claim rate of return on investment of 22.8%. Where does it come from? Well, from the proceeds of the investment. And my previous derivation suggests that the only way this can happen is if I have the ability to reinvest cash flows at the internal rate of return. So take that first term. Well, when this $1,000 comes in, what happens? Well, we don't put it under the mattress. It gets put back into the company. But here, to make this thing work, these two time periods, I have to be able to reinvest it at 22.8%. Well, why do I say that? Well, because the derivation tells me that. And secondly, if I add up what the value of those cash flows are at the end of year 3, okay, at 22.8%, I get the target. Right, so it's sort of, derivation tells me I need to do this, and here I'm just showing you that if I can reinvest those cash flows at 22.8%, indeed, I'm going to generate 22.22 worth of value, which is what I need to make the claim that I'm making 22.8% on my $1,200 investment. Okay. So all this does here is recognize the fact that when this 1,000 comes in, we have to be able to reinvest it for 2 time periods at 22.8. When this, whatever it is, what is it, 500 comes in, 1 time period, and then finally this thing, well, nothing happens to it during its time period. Okay. So derivation lends us to this. This is now the practical application of that derivation, which suggests the only way that I can claim 22.8% rate of return on this investment project A is if indeed I can reinvest at 22.8. Let's say the cost of capital for this project is 15%. Okay. So this company has a cost of capital of 15. Okay. Well, first thing I can say is that it's worth doing, because 22.8% is greater than 15. But can I claim that I've made 22.8 on this? Well, think about when that $1,000 comes in, can that company find a 22.8% investment? I doubt it, right? The best they can do is that this is their cost of capital, is find projects there. And if they can't, again, give the money back, that $1,000 back to shareholders as dividends. Because again, the notion of this is a shareholder opportunity cost. So shareholders, either within the company, because we have good engineering projects, or outside of the company, because we don't, and we're just going to give them their money back in dividends, will generate 15% value. So what I'm suggesting is there's absolutely no way from those three cash flows to generate 22 worth of value. Not possible. Unless every year there happens to be 22.8% projects laying around the company. Unlikely, if that's the case. So what is the real rate of return? Well, if the problem is making that assumption of 22.8, let's make something that's more realistic. And I think in my next example, rather than 15, I've used 10. So let's say that when that cash comes in, the cost of capital of this company is 10%. Okay? Which then means it is reasonable to assume that they could reinvest the money at 10%. So rather than, leave at 22.8, think about this now. This is just F given P, 10% common tip. In other words, that $1,000 can reasonably be expected to grow at 10%. Similarly, the 500. So the value that's created by this project is not 2222, it's 1860. Okay. What did the investor spend to generate that value over 3 years? Well, 1,200. Right? So if I basically now say, well, 1,200, again, using this definition here, but now I don't know what I is, so I'm going to say 1,200, F given P, I, comma 3, is equal to 1860. Okay. Well, this guy here is just 1 plus I to the third, and I plus. Okay. So now what I know is, well, how much value can I really create? What did it cost me? And then I just use the definition of return on investment, this future value, to figure out, well, what is my true rate of return? 15.7%, is it better now? Okay. So the key problem, if I go back to NPV, the fact that we are valuing the cash flows at 10%, or the cost of capital, implicit in that is a future value at 10% as well. So in that method for free, you get a reasonable rate of return, you get a reasonable assumption on your reinvestment rate. Because by virtue of using the 10% discount rate, or the K discount rate, implicit when you're doing equivalence, you're reinvesting those cash flows that come in at 10%. That's why that method always works. And again, 10% within the company or 10% dividend outside of the company where the shareholders get the money and invest it somewhere else doesn't matter. That money can grow at the cost of capital, that's the money. So that's the problem with this method, but it's still very, very functional. Any questions at all? Hopefully everyone's convinced that I can't reinvest at 22.8% when I have a cost of capital, let's say 10 or 15, which project is not available. And therefore I need to look at this from a slightly different point of view. Okay, so let's just have a look in terms of, again, since it's such a popular method, I want to just talk about some of the problems. Okay. Now, mutually exclusive projects are ones where I need to rank, right? And again, with IRR, I'm going to select, if they're independent, all of the projects where the IRR is greater than the cost of capital, okay, and I'm done. But if I have to say one's better than the other, I have to pause and reflect to see whether or not I'm being misled by IRR. Here is an example where there's a difference in order of magnitude in terms of the investments. It doesn't really happen that much in practice, but it's a good example of showing you where the method falls down. Okay, so I've got a tool, I can spend $100 and get $200 worth of benefits, or I can buy, a really good version of that tool, and it's going to cost me $1,000, and I get $1,500 worth of benefits. So if I blindly do IRR, I'm just going to solve that equation. And this one's an easy one to solve. And I'm going to see that obviously in project A, I'm doubling my money, right? So I got 100% rate of return. And here it's not so good, 50. And if I stop there, I'm going to say A is better than B. But my real question is, which one adds the most value to the company? Well, NPV now has a look and says, well, this is $82 worth of value. That's $364. And again, I have a conflict with the two methods. Okay. one am I going to choose? Well, I'm going to choose the NPV. But, you know, if the boss tells me, you always do things with IRR, or if the quiz tells you you've got to do IRR, then, you know, you got to look at the IRR to see how to fix it. Now, I never know what to do on a quiz, because a student will write down, well, you know, I learned in this course that the IRR never gives us. So I say, do this question using the IRR. And the student says, well, I learned in this course that I can't rely on the IRR, therefore I'm going to solve using the NPV, because I know I'm going to get the right answer. Yeah. And I don't know what to do with that person. So please don't do that. What do I need to do to fix this problem? What I need to do is to look at each chunk of invested capital and ensure each of those additional incremental investments are worth doing. That's the way that I can guarantee that this is going to work for me if, you know, I'm being told on a test or my boss tells me this is the way we do it. So look at it incrementally. Okay. I've got do nothing. This is not mandatory, so I don't have to do it. So my base investment is do nothing. I spend nothing, I get nothing. Okay. My first chunk of invested capital is $100, right? The difference between doing nothing and option A. Okay. And so on that $100, this thing tells me that I'm going to get a 100% rate of return. If my cost of capital is 10%, great, I'm going to spend that $100. Now the issue is not to spend $1,000 to gain $1,500. The issue is it worthwhile spending another $900 to gain $1,300 worth of additional benefits? Right? Because I know I can spend $100 to gain $200. So I'd be foolish to spend $900 to gain $800, even though it might look like it's worth doing by itself. So that's the way to look at it. So I'm going to say, let me look at incrementally. Incrementally or marginal helps us in this course an awful lot. So there, I'm spending an extra $900, right? So I've gone from do nothing to spending $100. That's a comparison of $100 wins. So I say, well, do nothing is not worth doing. And then my next investment is going to be the $1,500 one, and therefore, I'm going to get $1,500. So I'm spending an extra, whatever it was, $1,400. Okay. Well, is that worth doing? Or $900, I should say. I'm spending that $900. Is that worth doing? Well, am I not getting $1,300 worth of benefits for an additional $900? Okay. And that again is a very simple IRR to solve. Right? I've got one cash flow, take the present value of that, 1/1 plus I, and then subtract away the investment in incremental investment. Okay. So, yeah, 45%. So the way to look at this investment is, on the first $100, I get 100% rate of return. On the next 900, I get 45. And each of these is greater than my cost of capital, or minimum attractive rate of return, the mark of 10%. So all of a sudden, I get the same answer as NPV, which is I should spend 100 and 900, i.e. $1,000. Whereas if I just looked at it from the point of view of IRR directly and stopped there, put these numbers in Excel and just take them at face value, I would stop at $100. That's the wrong answer, because I can see from NPV that the B option will give me substantially more value than A. So that's what I want to do. I want to look at things incrementally. And okay. Now the algorithm is there's an algorithm for this, and 472 talks about this for the general case. And really, it's a way of looking at things, and I've got a review question at the end of chapter 4 where I'll go over this for you. But I want to look at pairwise comparisons where I'm starting with the cheapest and then linking the cheapest against the next most expensive. And when I do that pairwise comparison, I'm going to choose one of the two. The winner of that comparison then is checked against the next most expensive option. The winner of that pair against the next most until I run out. So each time I'm asking, the question, well, I've got something I think is worth doing. What's the incremental investment for the next most expensive option, and is that worth doing? And if it's not, I stay with where I am, and I go to the next most expensive that is beyond the one that I've just rejected. Okay. So it's a pairwise comparison in terms of ascending initial investment from end of year zero investment. Okay. And so the algorithm is defined in 472. Better not be put it in words just a little bit. But I'll show you an example on the board at the end of chapter 4, which will show you how this works for IR. Okay. Okay. So anyway, again, I need to just not take the IRR recommendations blindly. I need to have a second look. Okay. Now, what about if I really don't, look at this from that viewpoint? What I'd like to show is that you need some strategy here in solving these problems. You just don't go in and calculate numbers. And the strategy is a function on the interrelationship of the projects themselves. And it's especially true with internal rate of return when you're doing these types of calculations. So think about what type of projects I can have. I can have independent ones, like they have no interrelationship, and I can choose whatever permutation of projects that makes sense. Mutually exclusive, they're competing to do the same thing. I only want one. And budget constraints means I can't take them all because I can't afford it. So I want to optimize the subset of projects consistent with what I can afford. In number one, I do not need to rank projects. I just need to say accept or reject. In number two and number three, I need to rank them. I need to figure out which ones are better than the rest. Okay. So with IRR, since ranking is a problem, 2 and 3 will give me some problems. Okay. Now, let's have a look at this set of data, which can really be representative of an analysis. Okay. And so I've got these 5 projects, and I've got a cost of capital, again, minimum attractive rate of return, 10%. And these numbers are all costable, and I've valued them using the 2 methods, IRR and net present value. First analysis is to suggest that the projects are independent. And so, what will be my recommendation? What would be my recommendation if the projects are independent? Okay. And I'm going to make a recommendation using NPV, and I'm going to make a recommendation using IRR, and then decide which one is correct. Well, remember, if they're independent, I don't need to rank them. And therefore, IRR and NPV will give me the same recommendation. It's just yes or no, accept or reject. The criteria for net present value is, if the net present value of a project is positive, it adds value to the company. So if I look at these projects from an NPV point of view, independent projects, I'm going to recommend ABC. Right? And I'm going to add $210,000 worth of value to this company. IRR is the same thing. Greater than cost of capital, less than the cost of capital. Well, 15, 18, and 17 are all greater than. Okay. The other 2 aren't. And I'm going to get the same answer. Okay. And I've got the right answer in both cases. Now, let's say they're mutually exclusive. So I've got this one thing that I need done, and I've gone to public tender, and 5 companies are bidding on it. And I put their bid through my analysis, and those are the numbers that come out. So we're all doing more or less the same thing, but some are more costly than others. Some do things just a little bit better. Okay. I only need one to be exclusive. Well, NPV is going to make a recommendation based on the highest net present value. So here I'm going to choose A, which has $100,000 worth of value to the company. That's the right answer. But if I haven't done any other analysis than IRR, I'm going to say, well, B, because it returns 18%. Because that's all the information I have. You can argue that's suboptimal, because I'm only bringing $70,000 worth of value into the company. So that's obviously wrong. But if I didn't look at NPV, I wouldn't know that. Then finally, let's say that these projects more or less cost the same. So I've got a constraint on the budget. And let's say I can afford 2. Okay. Well, NPV says choose the 2 that have the greatest. So AB. And that recommendation brings $170,000 to the company. Same sort of problem with IRR. Obviously, 18 and 17 is better than 15. Therefore, I'm going to get B6. Suboptimal, because what if I'm only adding $110,000 worth of value? So that's the problem. And again, inherent in this is the notion that if I choose B, let's say because it's mutually exclusive, that when the cash comes in over the life of this project, we have the ability to reinvest at 18%. That's implicit in that ranking. Well, if the cost of capital is 10%, that is not necessarily a good investment, a good assumption. And therefore, the value that's being implied at 18% cannot be generated. We can only generate value based on that 10% reinvestment in cash. So that's the problem. But again, it's such a popular method that you have to be careful with its restrictions and limitations. So, but if you're asked to do IRR, then you have to think about it in terms of doing it. I want to just one more example here, where I'm looking at a project that possibly will give me multiple recommendations. And it's a sort of an interesting problem because it forces you to look at a business situation and not just sort of put the numbers through and crank it out, but ask the question, what is the true benefit to the company of this investment? Okay, because just putting the numbers through and doing an IRR will give you nonsense. Okay. So let's have a look at this first of all, from a mathematical point of view. My IRR equation is simply, take the present value, the future value, the cash flows, set it equal to 0, and solve for interest rate. Okay. Well, I can juggle that around a little bit and make it look like an n-degree polynomial. Okay. And our colleagues over in math tell us if I have a equation like that and I want to solve it, in general, there's n distinct roots, i.e. n solutions to that equation. But if their sign changes are limited, we can basically bound the number of possible roots. Okay? And so it's less than or equal to the changes in the sign of the coefficients. Okay? Now, very fortunately for us, for our normal engineering projects, where we spend money and hopefully have positive net cash flow for the rest of the life of the project, there's one sign change, i.e. there's only one answer, there's one root. And it may not be the right answer, but at least there's one. Okay. Let's talk about a project where perhaps we need to reinvest. So think about, I've got a project which has a long life span, and I'm going to put in some capacity to meet the next few years. And then I know that I need more capacity in year 3, and I'm going to have to put in some more capacity and spend a lot of money. So now I've got two negatives, right? This is the capital expenditure in year 3, and our friends over in math say, well, you got a problem, because you got a bunch of sign changes now, and you may get multiple answers. And the issue is, well, which one should we choose in terms of making a recommendation on this investment? Okay. So that's sort of the issue with this method, and it's good in the sense of trying to focus in on, well, why are we doing this? What's the benefit to the company, and how do we restate it in terms of making some sense of it? Okay, so let me show you an example, sort of simple. Okay, this is a project where I have two alternatives. It's either do nothing or spend some money to speed up the recovery of the oil. So this is an oil well, and essentially it's working right now, and it's got 2 years worth of oil left in it. And so with the current pump, I can take 50,000 out next year, and I can take 50,000 out the year after, and I'm done. The well is exhausted. But I've got some engineers that say, well, we can just for a very little amount of money spend on a new pump, and we can take all of that oil out next year. Now, are we creating any oil in this investment? No. We're just speeding it up. Right? We're just speeding the extraction. Okay. So with the new pump, we take it all out in year 1. And of course, there's nothing left in year 2. And the engineer likes this project, so he's going to put the best possible face on it, right? But he's coming up for bonus, and he wants to get a good bonus. Okay, well, let's do the net present value. Okay, well, $8,000 investment, I get $50,000 cash flow, difference between the two. So in other words, an extra $50,000 worth of cash a year from now, at the expense of not getting any oil in year 2. So let's say we're going to do this with an internal rate of return. Well, let's do the profile. let's see what happens to this project as a function of the cost of capital of this company. Well, first observation is money has no time value. I is 0. The 50,000 cancel out, and I've got a minus 8,000 down. Put some numbers in, increase I, and it starts coming up. And its first intercept is 25%. That's IRR number 1. And of course, it gets more profitable. And then at some point or other, as the time value money increases, those benefits aren't worth it, and it starts coming down. Well, here, I have another crossing of NPV equals 0 at 400%. And then, of course, the project's not worth doing it. Negative. So if I'm this engineer and I go to my boss, what do I tell him? I got this great project, and it has a rate of return of 400%. Give me $8,000, and give me a good bonus that's 400%, a great project, right, to make us rich. Or let's say I'm not really that gutsy, right, because I know the boss could say, there's nothing wrong there. But even if I say 25%, and the cost of capital here is 10%, that's a good project, right? I'm going to get a decent bonus. So I'm going to tell my boss, great project. I won't tell him about this, right? He doesn't want to do this stuff. I'm going to tell him this 25% rate of return. That's my project return. Give me the money. Okay. Now, if I tell my boss that, implicit in his mind is going to be, if I give this person $8,000 for this project, over 2 years, he's going to grow it by 25% a year. That's what, when I say, give me money and I'm going to have a rate of return, that's what it means. But remember, these are just solutions to that equation. As we've shown you, it's not necessarily the rate of return. So, what are we going to do to adjust them? Well, let's think about what the value of this thing actually is. Okay. Well, we're not creating any new oil. Right? All we're doing is moving it along a year early. Right? And, is that going to give us a 25% rate of return? Well, the way I like to look at it is from this point of view. Okay. Let's ask the question. Okay, let me do it this way. If I do nothing, this is what I'm going to get. Okay. Now, if the boss falls through this and gives me 8,000, what am I going to do? Well, so this is new pump. Quite simply, it's going to look like this. Spend 8,000 and get 100. Okay. Well, I want to compare the options so that I get some sense of, well, what's really happening. And again, I really can't compare these very well. Right, so I look at that and I look at that. And yeah, time value money says this is probably more valuable because I get my money sooner. Yeah. But is it worth $8,000? So let me try to figure out, well, what am I really doing? Am I not, if I spend the money on the pump, getting $50,000 a year early? I'm not creating any new oil. So the benefit of this to the company is simply $50,000 a year early. And let's try to measure the value of this to the company. Okay. Because that's really the only benefit. Okay. So again, benefit, $50,000 euro. And question mark benefit. What's it worth? Well, it so happens that in this company, and now this is an assumption, that, and you can assume cost of capital or whatever, I just assume that at the end of year 1, so end of year 1, there is a 1 year, 20% opportunity. It's an assumption. You may assume cost of capital doesn't matter. So let me say that if I have this $50,000, I'm going to be able to put it somewhere in another project at 20%. Whereas if I do nothing, I don't have that $50,000 to put away in the project. Okay. So let's see if that leads us to figuring out, well, why do we want to do this? So if I do that, what am I going to do? I'm going to take $50,000 of that 100, and I am going to put it in this project and return 20%. Which means that I will, equilibrium will say, 50, F given P, 20%, comma 1 is 60 grand. All right, 20% return on 50 grand, 10 grand. So this now defines the project. Of course, I want to compare it. Well, what about if I now do this? So what this project really looks like is spending 8 grand. I've got a net of 50. Right? Because I've got the 50. In either case, I've got 50 to do something with. Presumably put it to 20% project. But I'm trying to look at the difference between the two. Right? And I've got 60. I've reflected the fact that the only benefit of this new pump is getting 50 grand a year early. What's it worth? Well, it's worth 60 grand a year later. Well, now let's ask the question, well, what's the difference between the two? Well, this minus that. So if I spend the 8 grand, I'm going to spend the 8 grand. In year 1, there is no difference. In year 2, am I not ahead? $10,000. So I've isolated the benefit of having the money a year early. Right? So all I'm doing is this minus that. Well, all of a sudden, that doesn't look like 400% return. It doesn't even look like 25% return. Right? All I'm doing is earning a little bit of money on my 8 grand. What is it going to be? I'll work out here. The equation that governs this is I'm spending 8,000 to generate 10,000 2 years from now. So P given F I star, if I want to use internal rate of return on this, comma 2. So my return is 11.8%. Not anywhere near the 25 or 400% that the other methods suggest. So again, if I'm using Excel and blindly calculating these things, I'm going to make the wrong recommendation. So these types of problems are sort of interesting in that you've got to think about, well, yeah, I've got these numbers that come out of the IRR, but what is really the true benefit of the investment? In this case, there's no new oil, it's simply getting your money in Europe. Stop for any questions. That's a little more conceptually difficult than what we've been talking about now. And the key thing is, implicit in all of these formulas is that when the cash comes in, to make those numbers work, you have to be able to reinvest at that interest rate that's being solved for. And most of the time, it's too high, it's not achievable. Any questions? Please.
Why don't we take into account that we can invest the $8,000?
Well, we are in the sense that when, okay, let's say the MAR here is 10%. Okay. Then what I'm saying with this analysis is that if we didn't spend the 8,000 on this, we would generate 10% return, which would be less than this. Right? So we're measuring this against the 10% MAR. So I guess I didn't say what the MAR was. If the MAR is 10%, the fact that this investment returns 11.8 means it's good. But let's say the MAR was 15%, then we better be taking the $8,000 and putting it somewhere else. Okay. So the test here is against the MAR to see whether it's better. Thanks, I didn't point the MAR out. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Time perfectly. Okay, so in terms of project analysis, I'd like to talk a little bit about these other methods next day. Talk then about replacement analysis, a very important aspect of things. The equipment that wears out, and how do we decide what to replace it. And then we'll start talking about these. Thank you.
我感觉棒子那个还没讲。他上回就讲了 Chapter 3，他就讲了一下那个什么capital。
然后呢，把它去考试出了，然后就看这个大家考试看这个看这些东西。现在是吃饭了，你带的饭买饭。我没带饭，这个这没饭，交给他这个。